Senator Ron Wyden, thanks for giving us a few minutes of your time today. I appreciate it. There's two topics I'd like to discuss with you today. One is the ongoing pandemic and President Trump's actions since he's been diagnosed, and also the wildfires that are still raging throughout the state. So let's start with the wildfires, okay? I know you've been at the forefront in helping 8 counties get assistance for debris cleanup and hazardous material disposal from FEMA. So can you explain a little bit about what Category A assistance from FEMA really is, and what's the best way for those people who are affected to apply for it?
Tim, let's talk about why this is so incredibly important. The first is, as we all know as Oregonians, the rains are coming, and the hazardous materials are in effect piling up near the rivers. And folks want to rebuild. And so the reason I led this fight with Congressman DeFazio and our delegation is that time is of the essence. And if you don't go in there and use what's called Category A, this is part of the alphabet soup of FEMA, and don't use it to clean up those hazardous materials, they'll get into your water supply. For example, the Santiam here in the valley, it gets into the Santiam River, and then all of a sudden you've got a problem for the Salem water supply. So I'm really pleased that this morning we got some actual good news. FEMA is going to come through with this money. Now, the way it works is the local communities go out and do the work. They make arrangements to do the work to clean up the hazardous materials. And now under Category A, they are going to get reimbursed for a big chunk of those costs from the federal government. Now, we got a lot more to do. We've got work to help individuals with their own housing situation and debris removal. We've got a real need for housing. We've got scores and scores of people who are forest fire evacuees. And what we got to do is get them temporary housing and then go to work on manufactured housing. FEMA has a website. We'll get that number for y'all at KOIN. And then your congressional offices, we're the backup for FEMA. So if somebody's got a problem, we'll go in there and help. But this is urgent business, Tim. Time is of the essence because the rains are coming, and if all of that hazardous material leaches into the river, then we got another disaster on our hands. We already got one on our hands with this huge wallop we took with fires. Now, the reason we work so hard to get this help, what's called Category A, to fight the debris removal, is it can prevent another disaster, which would have been those hazardous materials leaching into the river, and then the water supply of places like Salem, apropos of the Santiam, would be devastated.
Is there a deadline for people to apply for FEMA help? Do you know?
Well, we've got all of that in effect up on the FEMA website, and we've got help for individuals. We'll get you all of those numbers, but I'm urging everybody to move now because the rains are coming.
So I know you've toured a lot of places. What are people who are affected by these wildfires telling you personally?
What they're telling me is even though they've lost their homes, they've lost their possessions, they've lost their businesses in many instances, they haven't lost their spirit. And that's the Oregon way. They're all ready to roll up their sleeves and get out there and do the rebuilding. And I basically made 3 trips now to these areas that got walloped by the fires. And when I compare this, because everybody knows I was a basketball player, not a particularly good one, but I went to school on a scholarship. This is like the first quarter of a basketball game. And we're going to be back for the second quarter. We're going to be back for the third quarter. We'll be back for the fourth quarter. We'll be here for overtime. Because on my watch, as the state senior senator representing Oregon, I'm not going to let these small communities be turned into sacrifice zones just because they're small and they don't get the attention that the bigger communities in the valley get. It's not going to happen on my watch. I'll be back again and again and again to do what it takes to help those communities rebuild.
Let's move on to the coronavirus, Senator. I think it's safe to say that the past week or 10 days has been a real head snapper on a national political level. So I'd like to ask you the question that Joe Biden was asked last night. Were you surprised that President Trump was diagnosed with COVID-19?
Certainly, based on the number of times that he would be out there without a mask at these open rallies and events where they were just sort of publicly declaring that there wasn't a risk, I think most public health experts would tell you this was no surprise, and I would share that view. I think what's been so troubling about how this has been handled is the president has actually played it down once again in terms of the seriousness of the problem. It's like once again, they're not focused on what public health authorities say is important. And when I go somewhere and talk to folks, I always say, this isn't about Democrats. It's not about Republicans. It's not about one political party. This is about keeping everybody safe. And the virus is not gone. When the virus shows up at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., nobody can ever say that this is all gone now, that this has been dealt with. And for the life of me, Tim, I don't know how these public health measures that are so basic have become a political issue, have become part of a culture war. This isn't part of a culture war. It's about keeping everybody safe.
I'm sure you've seen President Trump today made some tweets and Facebook posts that were removed by Facebook and flagged by Twitter that said COVID-19 was less deadly than the seasonal flu. So my question is, I know you've been a critic of tech companies over the year. Would you like to see them do more to remove false and misleading claims, or are they making good progress in that regard?
I would like to see them do more. And in fact, I wrote the law that provides legal protection for them to do more to, in effect, moderate, the content. What the law was really designed to do was protect the First Amendment, particularly for the person who didn't have power and clout and the like. And second, because the First Amendment is in effect really absolute in terms of protecting speech. I mean, it is the most, let's put it this way, it's the most expansive protection for speech. Under our law, what we did was give the platforms, the social media companies, the authority to moderate content. And you bet they should be doing more to moderate this kind of speech. They should be more to, in terms of dealing with election disinformation. Should have gone after some of the Russian, tactics early on. We saw that in 2016. So the platforms surely have to do more to protect the public interest. We gave them the authority in the law that I wrote to be able to moderate that slime. And we did that recognizing that, in effect, the First Amendment, I think this would be how I'd characterize it, doesn't provide that kind of moderating authority.
One final question for you, Senator, because we're just about running out of time here. The election is 4 weeks from today. What is your biggest worry regarding voting in the upcoming election?
Well, I just hope that, number one, people aren't fearful about voting. I think they ought to be shown by their local officials that steps have been taken to protect them. We have years and years of experience in our state with vote by mail. And I'm the nation's first senator elected by mail. I'm a Democrat. But the second senator in the nation elected by mail was Gordon Smith, who was a Republican. And so when the president is always talking about fraud and the like, we haven't seen that, and you don't have to take my word for it. People like Bev Clarno, our Secretary of State, who's a Republican, the late Dennis Richardson, who was certainly, as our Secretary of State, very conservative. That's how he characterized himself. He told the president before he passed that they haven't seen any fraud. So I just hope that people won't be intimidated by all of these misrepresentations about vote by mail. And then, of course, we're going to continue to be very rigorous in terms of protecting people's ballots after they've been cast. And some parts of the country got a lot of work to do, but I'm confident that that Oregon is going to work very hard to keep doing the job that we've been doing, and that's to protect the integrity of the franchise.
Well, Senator Wyden, it's always good to speak with you. Take care of yourself, sir, and continued good health.
You as well. Take good care, Tim. We'll talk again soon.
Okay.
Bye now.